In the previous lesson, we used a few simple calculations to retrieve a single, what we call scalar value from the server using a select statement that contains a single calculation as its argument. But many times when retrieving information from the server, whether that information is derived solely from calculations or is retrieved from one or a number of database tables, we may want more than one piece of information in each row we retrieve. So how do we do that? The answer is simple, and I'm sure most students taking this course have already done this in practice. We just extend the list of what we want to select, using the proper syntax, of course. But let's examine this in a little more detail. Here is most likely what we don't want to do, but it's amazing how many people try this at least once. Here we see two select statements on the same line about to be sent to the server. They are separated from one another by a semicolon character. This is syntactically correct in that each statement is terminated by that go command, but there's no magic in having them on the same line. The server still sees them as separate statements and processes them separately. So we receive two independent result sets in the sequence. Another mistake, which usually happens by accident, is to send two semicolon characters as the terminator of a statement. The first one is all that is needed. Since there is no statement preceding the second one, the server returns an error for the second one. The same thing happens if we send only a semicolon. Okay. Here's how we send a statement that will return more than one result back to us in a single result set. In our select statement, we separate the defining calculation for each result column we want from the preceding one with a comma character. We can think of the comma character here as a column separator, just like we can think of the semicolon character as the statement separator. In this case, we want two results to come back in the same result set side by side. But we could extend this to as many results as we wish by simply adding more calculations, each separated from the other by a comma character. The width of each column displayed in the result set using the command line client is determined by the maximum of the width of the column heading and the width of the widest value in the corresponding column. If the combined width of all of our column headings and/or resulting values is too wide for our client window here, each line will wrap around onto multiple lines until it is complete. With single line calculated results like we are using for the moment, this is still readable, but once we begin retrieving our results from database tables, large multi-row result sets that are also very wide will be difficult or impossible to read, at least in a command line client like we are using here. In real-world applications, this is usually not a problem because these applications usually take advantage of list or array variables or similar constructs and display fields that allow scroll bars and adjustable width columns. But in the untamed wilderness of the command line, we live without such luxuries. We also need to be careful here in another way. Just as with the semicolon character for separating SQL statements, if we follow one comma with another without a calculation between them, we will generate an error and our entire statement will fail. There must be at least something separating the comma characters besides just white space. If we truly want to have an expanse of space characters, we must explicitly state that by putting that string of spaces in quotes. If we truly want nulls returned, then we must state that as well. We will discuss the concept of null later in this chapter. So far, we have performed mainly addition calculations to keep things simple. In the next lesson, we will expand on this a bit by exploring a few operators and functions. And we have an entire chapter later in this course where we introduce a wider variety of useful functions.